Elaine. After 18 years, we're consolidating leadership, Marcus said flatly, eyes locked on his phone. Clean out your office by end of day. I sat across from him absorbing the hit while he scrolled through what looked like sports scores. The corner office, once filled with momentum and million-dollar decisions, now felt sterile hollow. 18 years, dismissed in the middle of a Tuesday lunch meeting. I understand, I said, my voice calm, despite the cold wave spreading through my chest. Thank you for the opportunity to serve Avalon Holdings. Marcus finally looked up, almost startled by my composure. He'd been bracing for tears. Raised voices, something to validate calling insecurity. Instead, my steadiness seemed to disarm him. Maybe even disappoint him. HR will coordinate the paperwork, he said, already refocusing on his screen. Sasha will walk you through severance. I stood, adjusted the lapel of my navy jacket, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, quiet, precise, final. My name is Elaine Carver. I'm 57. For nearly 2 decades, I led the compliance architecture at Avalon Holdings, a risk and asset management firm in Austin, Texas. I designed the regulatory reporting system that passed every FINRA and SEC audit for 14 straight years. My work was never flashy. There were no plaques, no speeches. But it kept the firm alive, protected, and operational. As I passed the sales floor, no one looked up. They didn't know yet. But the audit was scheduled for the following Monday, 5 business days away. In my office, the silence was different now. On my desk sat the audit prep flag documents, algorithmic reports, cascading checklists. Only I knew how they fit together. My encrypted drives contained the final verification sequences, authentication keys that no one else held. I had until 5 p.m. to clear out. I looked at the calendar. Next Monday's audit block was circled in red. I didn't grin. I didn't smirk. I didn't need to. The countdown had already begun, and Marcus had just fired the one person who could stop the clock from hitting 0. Back in 2005, Avalon was a lean firm with raw ambition. I had just come off a 7-year contract designing regulatory systems for private banks. We need someone who sees the road ahead, the founder, Judith Avalon, had told me during our first meeting. Not just what's required today, but what will be demanded 5 years from now. Judith was a visionary, and I delivered exactly what she asked. Judith Avalon understood early that compliance wasn't just a box to check, it was a strategic weapon. Under her leadership, I built a proprietary reporting system that forecasted regulatory pivots years in advance, not because I had a crystal ball, but because I studied patterns regulators hadn't yet recognized. When the 2008 financial crisis erupted and the regulatory floodgates opened, Avalon Holdings didn't flinch. While competitors scrambled to restructure and react, our infrastructure absorbed the shock. That's why I hired you, Elaine, Judith told me, as we breezed through our first post-crisis audit. Because you don't just check rules you see around corners. For years, I put in 60-hour weeks evolving the system, coaching junior analysts, personally verifying every key output that required my encrypted credentials. But when Judith retired 4 years ago and handed leadership to her nephew, Marcus Feldman, everything changed. Marcus didn't see compliance as a strength. To him, it was a drain, a non-revenue department that needed to be streamlined. In boardroom updates, he would check his phone while I detailed critical safeguards. In budget reviews, he questioned every line I submitted. Slowly, my team dwindled. From 10 trained professionals down to 4, all of whom relied on my institutional knowledge to keep the system operational. We need to run lean. Marcus repeated like a slogan he didn't fully understand. The market rewards efficiency. What he never grasped was that our lean performance wasn't luck, it was design. The system functioned smoothly, not because it was simple, but because the people running it had been trained over years to operate with surgical precision. Just last month, in the middle of audit preparations, I asked Marcus for a meeting. I wasn't planning to retire at 57, but I knew the risk of over-centralizing knowledge. We should plan for continuity, I told him. There are credential layers only I can authorize. He nodded, scribbled a note, promised we'd revisit it. That promise apparently became my pink slip. As I packed my office, I paused at the family photos: my husband Carl, our daughter Anna, and our ancient Labrador Milo. They would understand. They'd watched Avalon's culture shift from substance to performance. At 3 p.m., I had 2 boxes ready. Only my laptop and the audit materials remained. That's when Sasha from HR appeared, face composed, but voice low. "Elaine, I've got your exit paperwork," she said gently, closing the door behind her. "I'm really sorry about this, Elaine." Sasha's voice was quiet, her tone sincere. She was only 32 and had been with Avalon for just under 4 years. There was no way she could fully grasp the weight of what was unfolding, but I appreciated her effort. "Thank you, Sasha. These things happen in corporate life," I said, accepting the folder she extended. "The severance package includes 6 months' salary," she explained, pointing gently to the highlighted areas. "And your health benefits will remain active during that period." She handed me a pen. "You'll need to sign here, acknowledging receipt." As I flipped through the documents, I noted the familiar non-disclosure and non-disparagement clauses. Standard language. What stood out was what wasn't in there. I was restricted from discussing proprietary systems or speaking ill of Avalon publicly, but nothing required me to lift a finger if things started falling apart. "Everything looks in order," I said, signing where needed. "One question. The audit prep materials on my desk. Should I leave them?" Sasha hesitated. I wasn't given any instruction about that. "I guess anything work-related should stay." Of course I nodded. Though without my input, they won't mean much. They're mostly reference notes. Internal logic paths. She looked a little overwhelmed. "Maybe you could send your team an email, let them know where things stand." "That's a good idea," I said. "I'll take care of that before I go." After Sasha left, I sat at my computer one final time. I drafted an email to my 4 remaining team members, outlining exactly where we were in the audit prep, about 40% complete. I listed which files were in progress, which reports were still pending, and which verification protocols were locked behind my credentials. I laid it all out clearly, systematically, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. It was like handing someone a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box and half the pieces still hidden. I copied Marcus and CFO Randall Clark on the message, closed my laptop, and stood. The boxes I'd packed sat by the door, silent proof of closure. As I waited for the elevator, I heard quick footsteps behind me. "Elaine, is it true?" It was Melissa Nguyen, my senior analyst. She stared at the boxes. "You're leaving?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Today's my last day." "But the audit's next week," she whispered. "We're not ready without you." I stepped into the elevator. "I know," I replied softly. "Good luck, Melissa." The elevator opened. I stepped inside, boxes in hand. "I know," I told Melissa quietly. "I just sent an email with instructions. Good luck." The door slid shut, closing on her anxious face. As I descended to the lobby, I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for Marcus Feldman to grasp the magnitude of what he'd just done. Thursday morning, I woke at 6:00 a.m., same as I had for nearly 18 years. Normally, I'd review system alerts, prep for meetings, and confirm that every verification module had run clean overnight. Today, there was no dashboard waiting for me. I lay still beside my husband, Carl, listening to his soft breathing. The absence of responsibility felt eerie, not peaceful, just empty. My identity had been built around solving chaos with quiet precision. Without that structure, the morning felt directionless. By 7:00 a.m., I made my way downstairs, brewed coffee, and sat at the breakfast table with my personal laptop. Out of habit or maybe curiosity, I checked my work email, which I knew would remain active for 24 more hours. If you believe quiet strength deserves a louder stage, go ahead and subscribe. The next story begins where this one left off. 27 new messages had come in overnight. 3 system-generated alerts reported failed compliance tasks. The verification sequences that required my credentials had not completed. 8 messages came from my team filled with escalating confusion and urgency. The rest were from upper management. The tone had shifted from polite concern to full-blown anxiety. The most recent was from Randall Clark, Avalon's CFO. Sent at 6:43 a.m., it read, "Elaine, I realize your departure was unexpected, but we urgently need clarity on the audit prep status. The instructions you left are insufficient. Please call at your earliest convenience to discuss support options. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop without replying. Carl wandered into the kitchen moments later, hair tousled, coffee mug in hand. Checking on the fallout already, he asked, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. Just curious, I replied. As a retired engineer, Carl understood what happened when key systems lost their designer. How long do you think it'll take them to figure it out? By tomorrow, I said, sipping my coffee. The system will begin locking down modules when the verification windows expire. And when they call, I stared at my reflection in the dark surface of my coffee. Then they can pay for what they took for granted. Carl nodded. 18 years they owed you more than a lunch. By noon, my company phone started buzzing. I recognized Randall Clark's number on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Over the next 2 hours, 3 more calls came in, then a series of texts, each more urgent than the last. At 4:08 p.m., a call came from an unfamiliar number. On instinct, I answered. Elaine Carver speaking. Ms. Carver, this is Daniel Everett from Kingsley Rowe Partners, said a composed, confident voice. I hope I'm not intruding, but I heard about your recent departure from Avalon Holdings. I'd be very interested in speaking with you about potential opportunities if you're open to a conversation. Kingsley Rowe, Avalon's fiercest competitor in the Southwest. Larger, older, and laser-focused on regulatory strength. I'd met Daniel once or twice at national compliance forums, but never held a serious exchange. That's quite timely, Mr. Everett, I said. Yes, I'd be open. Would tomorrow at 9 a.m. work for a meeting at our Austin office? Tomorrow at 9 works perfectly. As I ended the call, Carl looked up from the newspaper. That didn't take long. It's a small town once you reach a certain level, I replied. The company phone rang again. Randall, 5th time today. This time, I answered. Hello, Randall. Elaine, thank God. We're hitting serious problems. The system keeps rejecting verification steps, and no one knows where we are in the prep. Can you come in tomorrow morning? I'm afraid I already have a prior commitment, I said evenly, but I'm available for consulting support at my independent rate. A pause. Consulting? Yes. I'm now working independently. My rate is $1,200 per hour, minimum engagement of 20 hours. Friday morning, I arrived at Kingsley Rowe's downtown Austin offices 15 minutes early. The building was understated, but elegant, cool limestone and glass modern, but not flashy. The reception area reflected the firm's brand, disciplined, discreet, dependable. Daniel Everett met me in person, smiling warmly as he extended his hand. Mid-60s sharp suit and the calm authority of someone who'd seen markets rise and crash and planned for both. Elaine, thank you for coming on such short notice, he said, leading me to a glass-walled conference room. I followed your work at Avalon for years. You built one of the most resilient compliance systems in the industry. Waiting inside were Kingsley's chief compliance officer, head of HR and general counsel. This wasn't exploratory. It was an offer. The meeting was clearly more than exploratory. We'll be direct, Ms. Carver, Daniel Everett said after introductions were complete. We're aware Avalon Holdings has a federal compliance audit scheduled for next Tuesday. We also know you designed their entire reporting infrastructure and were the only person authorized to execute certain verification protocols. Letting you go 5 days before the audit, well, that speaks to either extraordinary confidence or extraordinary oversight. I kept my posture steady. I can't speak to Avalon's internal decision-making. Of course, Daniel nodded smoothly. What we're interested in, he continued, is your expertise. Kingsley Rowe prides itself on regulatory strength. We've been planning a full rebuild of our compliance architecture for some time. Your unexpected availability presents an opportunity we'd be foolish not to explore. Their offer was unambiguous, a senior leadership role, heading compliance technology, a significant salary bump over my Avalon compensation equity options, and a benefits package that spoke to long-term respect. They wanted me to begin immediately as a consultant, transitioning to full-time after 60 days. We understand you may want some time, the HR director said, sliding a crisp folder across the table, but we're prepared to move fast if you are. I opened the folder. Everything was polished and professional: job scope, compensation reporting structure. The tone reflected not just urgency, but genuine respect for the craft I had built a career around. It was also a direct move against Avalon. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "and I'd like to review the details carefully. But yes, I'm interested." Daniel smiled. "Take the weekend. We'd be lucky to have you." When I left Kingsley Rowe's offices and stepped into the parking garage, my phone showed 7 missed calls. 3 from Randall, 2 from Marcus himself, and 2 from blocked numbers I assumed were Avalon extensions. There was also an email from Marcus' subject line, "Urgent consulting arrangement." I opened it. "Elaine, I understand you've offered consulting support for the audit. While the rate is steep, we recognize the urgency and are prepared to proceed immediately. Please call me to finalize details. Marcus." As I finished reading, my phone rang again. Randall. "Elaine, have you had a chance to consider our request?" he asked, tension tightening every syllable. "I've reviewed Marcus's message," I replied evenly, "but you should know I just left a meeting with Kingsley Rowe about a permanent role. They've made a very attractive offer," I said evenly. Randall Clark exhaled sharply on the other end of the line. "Elaine, please. We're in a critical situation. The system is generating errors no one understands, and the audit team arrives in 5 days." "I'm aware of the timeline," I replied. "Marcus has acknowledged my consulting terms. Are you asking if I can start today?" "Yes, right now, if possible." I let the silence stretch for a beat. "I have another engagement this afternoon," I said. "But I could be available Monday morning, 8 a.m. "Monday," he repeated, clearly calculating. "That leaves us just Monday and Tuesday to prepare." "Yes," I confirmed. "That's correct." By Monday morning, the panic at Avalon Holdings had reached a boiling point. Over the weekend, I received 17 calls and more than a dozen emails each, more urgent than the last. I only responded once to confirm I would arrive at 8:00 a.m. sharp with a signed consulting agreement in hand. Walking back into the building felt surreal. The lobby security guard, Mateo, raised his eyebrows. "Miss Carver, I thought you left." "I'm back," I replied, holding up the visitor badge Randall had arranged. "As a consultant." Mateo nodded slowly. "Well, they've been scrambling since Thursday. Mr. Clark was here until nearly midnight Saturday. I rode the elevator up to the 12th floor carrying only my handbag and a slim leather portfolio that held the signed contract. I wore a new suit, charcoal gray, tailored chosen specifically to mark the difference I wasn't staff anymore. I was an external professional brought in under duress. The office buzzed with unusual energy for so early in the morning, nervous conversations, frantic keystrokes, stress in every hallway. As I made my way toward the designated conference room, Melissa Nguyen spotted me. "Elaine, thank God. It's chaos. Nothing's working. Reports are breaking, and the system keeps locking up." "Good morning, Melissa," I said with a measured nod. "I understand there are complications with the audit preparation." She blinked at my tone, surprised by the distance. Before she could reply, Randall appeared in the doorway. "Elaine, thank you for coming," he said, relief flooding his voice. "Everyone's inside." The conference room was full. Marcus, Randall, the remaining compliance staff, and 2 IT analysts I recognized. Marcus looked worn down, shirt rumpled, eyes hollow. "Let's begin," he said quickly. "The audit is tomorrow." "Wednesday," I corrected gently. "You still have 2 days." "Barely. The audit is scheduled for Wednesday at 9:00 a.m., I said calmly. "Tomorrow is Tuesday," Randall added, looking at the room, "which gives us today and tomorrow to finalize everything." I placed my portfolio on the conference table and pulled out the consulting agreement. "Before we begin," I said, "I'll need this signed and the initial payment processed. 20 hours at $1 $200 per hour. Total of $24,000. Marcus's jaw flexed, but he gave a quick nod toward Randall, who took the folder without protest. "We'll process it right now," Randall confirmed. "In the meantime, could you help us understand what exactly we're looking at here?" I turned toward the large monitor mounted on the wall. The compliance dashboard was projected across the screen, filled with red warning flags and status errors. "What you're seeing," I began, "is the system doing its job, protecting itself." I gestured to the locked-out modules. The reporting framework operates under progressive verification. Each section of the system requires authentication during key windows. If those windows pass without proper clearance, the modules lock to prevent corruption of compliance data. And you're the only one with credentials to unlock those modules, Marcus asked. Yes, I said. As we've discussed for years, the system uses segregated permissions. It was designed that way deliberately. It's part of why we passed 14 straight audits. Silence settled across the table as the weight of the situation became clear. If we can't generate the reports, one of the junior analysts asked. Randall exchanged a glance with Marcus. Best case, we're fined, he said. Worst case, the SEC imposes trading restrictions while they investigate. I offered a polite smile. Shall we get started? By late Tuesday, even with my guidance, it was obvious Avalon wouldn't be fully prepared in time. We'd managed to regain access to roughly 60% of the system. But the remaining components, especially those involving attestations and cross-validation, were incomplete. This process usually takes 5 weeks, I reminded the group. We're trying to condense it into 48 hours. Marcus paced the perimeter of the room, phone in hand, his usual confidence unraveling. What are our options? You could request a deferral from the SEC, I offered. Citate internal restructuring. Be transparent. Randall shook his head. That just brings more scrutiny. Marcus stopped pacing. Elaine, what would it take to finish by? Tomorrow morning, I looked around the room and gave the only honest answer I could. More than you've paid for. Working through the night might get us to around 80%, I said. But the risk attestations require board signatures, and 3 modules still need full verification cycles. That process alone takes 12 hours to execute properly. So, it's impossible, Randall concluded. Not impossible, I corrected, but beyond the scope of our current consulting agreement, which, as you know, ends at 5 p.m. today. Marcus's expression darkened. You're saying you'll leave at 5 no matter what. I have a commitment tomorrow morning, I said evenly. A final interview with Kingsley Rowe Partners. The room went still. Everyone knew what that meant. I wasn't just walking away. I was stepping directly into the office of their closest competitor. Marcus folded his arms. How much? To stay until it's done? I asked, closing my laptop slowly. You'll need about 30 more hours of my time, at my emergency rate of $800 per hour, considering the overnight turnaround. I paused. That's $54,000, payable immediately. He didn't flinch. Done. Randall, process it. I nodded, reopening my laptop. Then I suggest everyone get comfortable. It's going to be a long night. By Wednesday morning, the conference room looked like a battlefield of coffee cups, highlighters, and half-charged devices. We'd made real progress. Most modules were back online, the verification cycles were nearly done, but the system was still processing the final checks when reception called. They're here, Melissa said breathlessly. SEC team just arrived. They're early, Randall muttered, checking his watch. It's only 8:30. Stall them, Marcus said quickly. Offer coffee, give them the guest Wi-Fi, whatever. I glanced at the screen. The final verification bar was at 87%. At this rate, I said we need at least another 30 minutes. Should I go greet them? I asked lightly. Marcus snapped his head toward me. Absolutely not. I don't want them knowing we had to bring you back as a consultant. Understood, I said. But in that case, you'll have to explain the incomplete modules yourself. Randall looked uneasy. We have to disclose the GAP's SEC rule. 17A4 requires transparency, I reminded them. Any misrepresentation would be a violation. Marcus's face turned crimson. This is ridiculous. We paid you $78,000 to fix this. No, I said calmly. You paid me to assist with audit preparation. The system failing was the result of choices made before I returned. You paid me to assist with audit preparation on an emergency basis, I clarified. And I've done exactly that. The fact that the system isn't fully operational in time for the audit is a direct result of decisions made before our agreement began. The progress bar ticked upward, 91% complete, just as voices echoed faintly from the reception area. The SEC team was being escorted to their designated room. What do we do now? Randall asked, his voice fraying at the edges. I smoothed my suit jacket and gathered my things. You tell them the truth. 3 weeks later, I sat in Daniel Everett's office at Kingsley Rowe Partners, reviewing the second phase blueprint for our new compliance infrastructure. My nameplate, Elaine Carver, Senior Vice President Compliance Technology, gleamed softly on my desk. The view from the 18th floor looked out over downtown Austin. Clean, bright, forward-looking. Daniel walked in, a folded newspaper in hand, and placed it on my desk with a subtle smile. Seen today's business section. The headline read, Avalon Holdings, fined $2 million following failed SEC audit. The article detailed how the firm had been placed under enhanced regulatory supervision and hit with trading restrictions on key investment products. Major compliance gaps, incomplete reporting, and internal failures were cited. Unfortunate, I said, setting the paper aside. For them, certainly, Daniel agreed. Word is, Marcus Feldman is no longer with the company. That didn't surprise me. Apparently, the board finally acknowledged his poor judgment. After a fine like that, they didn't have much choice. He paused. They even say Judith Avalon came out of retirement, at least temporarily, to stabilize things. That gave me pause. Judith had always understood the value of infrastructure, of people. She would never have made the same decision Marcus did. How's the new system build? Progressing, Daniel asked, shifting gears. On track, I replied. We're 6 weeks from a full framework launch, well ahead of our next audit window. Good. The board was thrilled with your presentation. They've approved your budget request for the specialized hires. Daniel excused himself, and I turned back to my screen, where I was finalizing job descriptions for the team I was building from scratch properly, cross-trained, documented, and secure. Everything Avalon had refused to prioritize. My phone buzzed, a text from Carl. Dinner tonight. You've earned it. I smiled. This wasn't just a fresh start. It was the version of my career I should have had all along. Dinner tonight to celebrate 1 month at the new job. Carl's text glowed on my screen. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. I'll bring the wine. Life had taken an unexpected turn, but I hadn't just landed on my feet. I had landed standing taller than before. My compensation at Kingsley Rowe was nearly 40% higher than what I earned at Avalon. My responsibilities had expanded. And more importantly, I was part of a culture that treated regulatory architecture as a strategic pillar, not a compliance burden. Later that afternoon, an unexpected email appeared in my inbox. From Judith Avalon, subject regret and reflection. Elaine, I hope you're well. I've returned temporarily to stabilize things here, and I wanted to reach out personally. The decision made regarding your position was short-sighted and has had serious repercussions for the firm. While I understand you've moved on, and by all accounts to an exceptional role, I wanted to offer my personal regret for how things were handled. You deserved better. Warmly, Judith. I read the message twice. It was gracious, sincere, and it mattered coming from someone who had once believed in the long game. But I felt no urgency to respond. Perhaps with time, the sting would dull. But right now, I was too focused on building something better, stronger than what I'd left behind. The past month had taught me something essential. Real value isn't always seen in real time. Expertise honed over decades can be dismissed with a single sentence, but the consequences of that erasure don't vanish with it. They echo loudly through missed deadlines, broken systems, and million-dollar mistakes. And sometimes, the most powerful form of revenge doesn't look like retaliation. It looks like silence. It looks like stepping aside and letting the walls crack without lifting a hand. As I looked around my new office, clean lines, confident systems, and a team I was handpicking from the ground up, I felt something I hadn't in years: full agency. The best response to being underestimated isn't rage. It's excellence sharpened, refined, and aimed at a stage where that excellence is truly recognized. And that's exactly what I intended to deliver. If you've made it this far, thank you truly. You've walked with me through boardrooms, betrayal, sleepless nights, and the quiet satisfaction of standing tall when others tried to shrink my worth. I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have handled it differently? Have you ever been pushed aside after giving your all? Leave a comment below. Not just for me, but for others who might be going through the same thing in silence. To those of you who've ever been told you were too expensive, too experienced, or no longer aligned, remember this value doesn't vanish just because someone refuses to see it. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make isn't to fight your way back in, it's to walk out with grace and let your absence echo louder than your presence ever did. Support isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the stories we choose to share, the voices we lift up, and the lessons we carry forward. If this story resonated with you, like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe, because I have more stories to tell and more quiet victories to celebrate. Maybe yours will be next.